So I gave a talk last night. It was directed towards fellow Minnesotan art students, but I think it should apply to hopefully all art students. And I talk about how I got into this whole business in the first place. I talk about my 2 internships in LA and what I got out of that and how you might get into that. I talk about artistic mentorship and what that can do for you. And I talk about how I made a short film and how you might make a short film. And I'm going to be starting my second short film shortly, so I'm really excited about that. And I think I basically gave all the advice I could possibly have in my 19-year-old body. So even though I haven't uploaded for the last year, consider this a year's worth of videos combined into one put together tight hour, and use it as an archive of sorts. Most of all, thank you for sticking with me all these years, and I hope this video helps you somehow.
Okay, enough of my dumb dad jokes. Let's get on to the main event with Natalia Podryakin. So here's your mic.
All right.
And were you gonna do the stage, or are you gonna?
I'll go over. I'll get over there.
Yes.
Just give me a moment. Hello, my name is Natalia Podryakin. It's Russian. That's why everyone struggles. I understand. I also struggle, and it's my own name. So I'm here to hopefully deliver the most rad art talk ever. I haven't been to that many, so don't tell me if somebody beats me. I guess I can just use arrows? Yes. All right. Okay. I want to begin with a manifesto, which is Minnesota animation is the sum of its talent pool. So it actually wants you and me as students to get better so that it can get better. I'm going to talk about a story. I just got back from interning in LA on the new Animaniacs reboot. It's my second year back there. And while I was there, I set up a meeting with the president of Warner Brothers Animation. That is a sort of side note, which is that important people are far less distant than they seem. Hollywood executives specifically usually have assistants. Please email the assistant, not the executive. It is considered basic etiquette, and it will get you far. The second thing is that being low on the rung of the totem pole is actually an asset because it makes you non-threatening. These people that are high up see your initiative, and they don't see you as someone who's trying to get something out of them. They see you as someone who wants to learn more, and that's how you should also present yourself in order for them to see you that way. And so I set up a meeting, and I asked just for 30 minutes of his time, and I came prepped with questions that were respectful of his position, because you don't really want to ask questions like, can you please hire me? Even though you would really like to ask that question. That is a question for somebody who is a recruiter. Something that you ask a president is my question, which is, hypothetically, if I wanted Minnesota animation to be bigger and better and to produce more entertainment content, how would you go about that? And what he said was that the funding is now there. Places like Netflix and these streaming services are willing to give studios money, even if they aren't in Hollywood. I mean, Puny Entertainment is an example of a studio here that has been doing projects for Amazon Prime and Netflix, like Danger and Eggs and 12 Forever. And so the funding is available. The thing that really determines whether more projects like that happen is the talent pool. And right now, nobody can compete with the talent pool of a place like Burbank, California, because they have a union for their animators, and they have things like benefits and twice the salary of what you might achieve here. And so anybody who is able to make it in that big fish pond is going to move over there. And so that's why it's important for us students specifically to get better and get art buff, because we can become the talent pool. We can break the loop that keeps Minnesota animation stuck, where we want to get bigger projects, but in order to get bigger projects, we need better animators, but we can't get better animators unless we have bigger projects. But if we become the better animators, then we can get those projects that we want. That's why I think that's important. Next slide. Yeah, this is my quick introduction about me. I am 19. I am a student at the University of Minnesota. As I said, I have now interned at Warner Brothers for 2 summers as an animation intern. And before that, I got really involved with the local industry with Nice Moves and with Puny Entertainment when I was in high school. And that's how I ended up here. Next slide. My origins. This is the worst photo that probably exists of me, and you're welcome. I have exposed myself willingly. I can't believe you would do me dirty like that. So I grew up as the child of Russian immigrants, and they really hoped that I would go into STEM because they were all computer scientists, and my brother was a computer scientist. But they showed me Russian Soviet cartoons when I was a child. Next slide. Like the Russian version of Winnie the Pooh. And it's a beautiful piece of artwork that has nothing in common with the Disney version. I really recommend you look it up. You can find it on YouTube. And it has a whimsical, colorful quality while being unashamed to be nihilistic and contemplative and weirdly sad. And that is what I grew up on. And so even though my parents might be upset that I'm not getting a biology degree, it's really their fault for sharing their culture with me. All right, next slide. So the second part of how I became an artist is growing up online. And that's why I think for all of us, becoming an artist has been a vastly different experience than anyone else before. I started posting my work to DeviantArt. This is my ancient DeviantArt page. I started posting here when I was in 5th grade. And so I grew up living this double life where I was sketching in my sketchbooks and putting work online, and people were responding to it and leaving comments, all the while I was, taking math classes. And I think this is part of a bigger trend of why more women are in animation as a whole, because we saw artwork without seeing the artist. We saw art as something that we could achieve and we could work on ourselves without always attaching it to male genius, as sometimes is what happens. And so I credit it a lot to why I'm here. Okay, next slide. So I grew up drawing. I wanted to be an animator, and I was going to a suburban high school out in the middle of nowhere, and my art classes were not prepared to teach me what I wanted to learn. You could do a bunch of still lives, and that was not going to help me make animated films like what I was seeing in my childhood, and that was what I wanted to make. And I saw those being made on the internet, so I knew somebody was making them. And that's how I ended up reaching out to find someone outside of my school that could help me do what I wanted to do. So, mentors. This is, hopefully a relatable meme. How did I get a mentorship? I was 16, and I sent 3 cold emails to people that I respected in the community because I saw their work online and I wanted to be involved. Now, I'm very conflicted telling you this because I don't think you should send cold emails thoughtlessly. The last thing I want you to do is to spam every industry veteran in this area with copy-pasted, you know what I mean. They deserve better. As a rule of thumb, treat other people's attention with respect. They will appreciate it. And I only sent those cold emails because I had no other link to the community. Meanwhile, you guys are here at Nice Moves, so you already have a huge leg up, okay? You don't have to pester people without first meeting them face to face by coming to more events like this. and introducing yourself, and just having that moment of one-on-one contact, I think is going to come across a lot more sincere than just, pestering someone out of the blue and asking for something as valuable as a mentorship. Next slide. So I think the rules of dating also apply to the rules of mentorships. So there's one rule of what you should never do on a first date, and that is propose. Okay? So when I was sending these cold emails, if you're in a position where that's the route that is most accessible to you as well, I was not, please mentor me and teach me how to animate. I was like, I really respect your work. Here are a lot of the qualities that I connect to in it, and I just want to hear more about your process. I want to be able to observe in some way, or essentially learn without intruding too much on your personal time and resources. And so you go on that first date, you see how it goes, you see if you guys have a similar artistic vision, you see if they are interested in your work as much as you are interested in them. And then you can start building a relationship instead of proposing on the first date. Nobody wants that level of commitment. Next slide. Humans are animals that can smell intent. So let's say you're not doing cold emails, you're meeting people face to face. When I started mentoring with Emery and Alicia through Nice Moves, one of the first things they did was take me to a networking event, and I learned a lot about what not to do. So what I saw was, while I was there as a high school student, I think I approached it with the perspective of, I'm not looking to get hired yet, I'm just interested in finding out about what people do. Versus I saw a constant stream of fresh college grads, shuffle up to some animator in the industry, throw a business card at them and awkwardly leave. And I just don't think that's really effective. So I would say that don't approach networking thinking that it's networking. I know that sounds like BS and weird business lies, but you have to get out of that mindset and more into the mindset of, I am passionate about what you're passionate about, and let's talk about that without having the weight of expectation over it. All right, next slide. This is the story of how I ended up with my first mentorship with Mike Owens, who is in the audience right now. And this is the email I sent to him when I was 16. And I don't think I would do this now. And I'm very grateful for the sheer kindness of being able to look through this wall of text and see a genuine intent there. But out of the things that I think I did right, it was that I wanted to create a short film when I was 16. That was my goal. And so when I was reaching out, I don't think there was a pressure of you have to give me motivation to tackle what I want. You have to do the work for me. Instead, it was I'm going to do this work, and if you have the time and resources, I would appreciate if you could help me with that. And then the second thing is I just put a link to my Tumblr blog at the bottom, and that was the game changer for me. Because of that Tumblr blog, Mike directly told me later that when he just clicked on it and scrolled through, he saw that I'd been regularly posting on there almost every day for years. And he said that was more work than what recent art school grads were putting out when he was attempting to hire people for his production. And so, next slide. The moral of the story is getting a foot in the door is substance plus a wide net. The substance is making good work, and a lot of it, and putting it somewhere online. It should probably not be classwork, because if you really love animation, hopefully you're not just doing it because someone's assigning you to do it. You're doing it because you want to do it, and that will be reflected in how much you dedicate to it outside of class time. And then the wide net is literally the internet. It has net in the name. So there you go. And there's also the acknowledgement of privilege plus luck. When I was in high school, I did not have to work a job to earn additional income. And like now in college, I am attending the U of M because I got a full ride academic scholarship there. So I also don't have to work additional jobs to earn income. And those things add up because they eat away at the time that you have to meet up with people for that first mentorship coffee date and to go to your mentor's studio to work on your project. And so that's just something to never forget of, like, if you have stuff going on in your life, like, I will never hold it against you for doing what you can. And also there's a fair bit of luck. Next slide. So post your work and make more of it. I try to keep updating my social media as much as I can, and I'm always surprised at what bits and pieces come out of it. Next slide. I don't know. I had a YouTube channel when I was in middle school. This is a weird fact about me. Which is why people are always like, you have a lot of followers. And I'm like, but they're not following me for the right reasons. Anyways. Next step. So you can, pursue a mentorship for whatever reason you may like. But I'm obviously biased since I decided I wanted to make a film. I am now going to convince you why you should also make a film. So a film is a complete thing. And as students, you're probably making a lot of incomplete things. And unlike a portfolio reel, a film shows that you can think big but tie a lot of little ideas into a cohesive concept. That matters a lot when you are making real work for the real world, because you are not making little bits that don't add up into anything. You are making a complete project for a client. So second, it proves that you can finish what you started. Because a short animated film, as animators, you probably know, animation takes a really long time. So even if you're really motivated and you really love it, when you sit down to start a short film, that's a couple months to a year of your life. It took me a year to make my first short film. And being able to follow through on that means self-regulating. It means, when you come back from class, when you come back from work, you have to sit down and make yourself do the thing. And no one else is around to tell you to do that. You don't have a deadline to turn it in by, like where your professor will be mad at you. You're not going to get graded on this. This is something that you are doing for yourself. And that's what life is like after you graduate. So get into the habit of doing it now. So number 3, a film is a calling card. People still think of me by the film I made. It's called Thaw, which is a little frustrating when it's a film I made when I was 16 to 17. But it's just more motivation for me to make another short film now. Next point, films breed films. If you make one film, you can make 2 films because you have the confidence of having successfully completed the first one. You're like, oh my God, like Hayao Miyazaki makes films, Wes Anderson makes films, now I make films. And that's like, that's like a power trip and you can keep going on it. So when you, there's a classic quote of everyone has 10 bad films inside of them, so get them out quickly. If you're waiting for your senior year thesis film to be the film, I'm a little worried that it might not be the film because there's 10 bad films and you've only just embarked on your first one. Not to say that the first film you make will inherently be bad, but you're gonna get better with each one and it's addicting, so get going. And finally, films can be submitted to film festivals. Yes. And that can help get Minnesota on the map, because if we, as students, start regularly making films, and we start making good ones, and then a lot of people see them in film festivals like Glass, festivals like Ottawa, festivals like, high levels like Annecy, that's going to put Minnesota on the map, and that's a good thing. So yes, if I have successfully bullied you into making a film, next slide. Oh, okay, I guess I had another slide I forgot about. These are little screenshots from my film. Next slide. How do you make a good one now that you've decided to make one? I've boiled it down to 3 things: tools, time, and a good pair of eyes. Next slide. Okay, it's kind of, sorry, the pastel's a little faded, but what it says is tools are simple compared to live action anyway. So as animators, we have the advantage of when we want to create like a high concept sci-fi film, we don't literally have to build a spaceship. We can draw it. And we don't need a camera crew and a lighting guy and an intern to get coffee. You can just sit in your bedroom, and with a semi-investment into a digital drawing tablet, you can create this whole world on your own. So it's intimidating still, but a lot less intimidating than if we were in live action. Next slide. As a general fave of what I like to work with, I used a really bad Intuos tablet that was released 10 years ago. I got it in middle school from my parents as a Christmas gift. And that's what I animated Thaw on with Mike at Puny Entertainment. And it got the job done, but I'm very happy to now say that I bought a Cintiq. It sped up my process quite a bit. They cost a couple $1,000s, which is not cheap. I hope that through your schools you might have access to Cintiq labs. Please take advantage of that. So second thing is I animated my whole film on Adobe Photoshop with the AnimDessin plugin. So in general, this is kind of a weird quirk of the Minnesota animation industry. Nobody else really animates in Photoshop, as far as I can tell, other than us. But there are a lot of unique things you can do with it that you can't do in other programs. You have access to all the unique brushes and textures that Photoshop has, unlike Adobe Animate, which is pretty limited in the line quality you can achieve. So that's why I really like it. But if you get this plugin, it's twice as usable. It's like a lifesaver. I really recommend it. If you've ever used TV Paint or have heard of it, I feel like this combo is a very good dupe for that program, which might save you money. And finally, I just like the Canson Mixed Media Sketchbook. I'm sketching all the time. I'm sketching from life. I'm trying to record what I see around me because it's fodder for good filmmaking and for good art. So I recommend you do that as well. Next slide. Time. You need a lot of time to make a good film. If you're rushing, it is very obvious. But you're like, oh my God, I'm in college. And I'm like, I know, I'm also in college. And the thing is we probably have a lot more time than we think while we're young. We don't have kids, guys. We don't have kids. So that means we can dedicate ourselves to our own personal development above all. And I know maybe you guys have significant others, but they can wait. This is more important. So once, going back to my initial point in the presentation, obviously there's a lot of industry veterans in Minneapolis that I really respect that I think are adding to the talent pool. But they have to dedicate themselves to earning a consistent income now because, they might have a family to support and it's better for them to stick to what they know they can achieve. But as young people, we need to embrace the fact that our potential in what we can develop is unrestricted. Instead of tailoring our skill set to what will get us hired in the industry now, we can try to push to make the industry different. So in my case, I am really invested in becoming a storyboard artist, and storyboarding is my passion, but that's not exactly something that's super present in the Minneapolis industry, even though that's where I want to work. But I believe that if I work really hard to develop that skill set during a time in my life where I don't need to be earning money with it right now, that by the time I do need to earn money with it, I can be part of the shift that makes it more accessible, if that makes sense, hopefully. All right, next slide. So, okay, you can't really read that, but this is sort of a detour. Get up and move to avoid muscle fuzz. Okay. When I was 16, I heard a story that has stuck with me ever since. I don't know if it's true, but I had a TA who gave a presentation, and he showed us like dead corpses of people at the morgue where they open them up and there's just a bunch of white fuzz. And the thing he said was, he was like, the fuzz is there because they didn't exercise enough while they were alive. Now, I don't know if this is true, but that doesn't matter because it motivates me to get up every day because I don't want my corpse to be full of fuzz when I die. So this relates to the whole time thing because as students, we're like, we don't have time to go to the gym and also work on our portfolio and pass our classes. But the secret is once you graduate, you don't have any more time. You always think that you're going to be able to incorporate it into your lifestyle later, but you have to actually do that habit now because it's not going to get easier and it's not going to start later. And there's a very concerning trend right now of people leaving art school with carpal tunnel, a thing that people used to get when they were in their 40s in the animation industry. And it's really sad if your career is cut short before it even started. So I cannot stress this enough. Okay, next slide. So finally, to make a good film, you need a good pair of eyes. And this ties back to the whole mentorship part of the talk, because if you just make a film on your own, it might be pretty good, because we all try to train our eyes as best as we can. But if you want to create something that's beyond your capabilities, you need someone with a bigger set of capabilities to look at it. And that's really that. Yep. Oh, okay, cool. I do expand on this. Where does one find a good pair of eyes? The most common route is school/college. And this is really the biggest argument for why people should go to art school, because there's not necessarily, I'm sorry guys, there's not necessarily a whole lot going for it otherwise. I mean, it costs a lot of money, and the resources can be found elsewhere, but there are a lot of good pairs of eyes at art school. So if you are in one, you should take advantage of that, right? Those eyes can be your professors, they can be your peers, it can be visiting artists, there's all sorts of eyes there. But if you are not in art school, like me, there's your local art community, and there's a mentor in the industry potentially that you could find, and they can be your pair of eyes. Like here at Nice Moves, cool. Third point, online. This is also why it's good to post your work online, because you're gonna see how people outside of your sphere of influence respond to your work. And there's a chance that you find a unique niche for yourself. I think this is why there's a lot of creators now that maybe their ideas would never be greenlit by a Hollywood executive, but they're able to make money off of their work because there's a different community of people that happen to find their work and says, yes, I want to pay money to see more of that. So even if your work isn't traditionally marketable, maybe you can find a place for yourself on the internet. And then the bottom line is yourself. How do you train your eyes? Well, you watch good stuff. You watch good films. You read good books. You absorb content so that then you can hold your own work to that same standard. I think as students, it's tempting to view your own work as like it's in its own little bubble, and then the work of the people you admire and respect is like way up here, you know? But they're in the same like stream of art and culture, and it's scary to look at it that way because you can see how much further you have to go, but it also means you're not lying to yourself, and it's going to push you to, you know, reach higher than maybe you would otherwise. Yeah. Too cool for school. So this is going to be, you know, close and personal for all of us, since I'm assuming most people in the audience are in school right now. But I have a pretty aggressive philosophy of being too cool for school. Even though I'm in school right now, you have to maintain the too cool for school philosophy while you're in school so that you remember that no one is going to educate you but yourself. Your professors, even like your peers, no one is gonna give you the exact skill set you want. And that's frustrating. And it sucks because, you're paying them money. Like, shouldn't they be, But in the end, I think it's ultimately liberating because when you graduate and attempt to get into the animation industry, correct me if I'm wrong, professionals, but I don't know anyone who's going to look at your degree before they look at your portfolio. And when I was being interviewed for internships, no one cared about what school I went to. They cared about the words coming out of my mouth, and they cared about the art I had to present. So what does that mean? Okay, wait, the degree I'm paying for isn't actually useful or worth anything. Oh no. Okay, it's not all over because there's still the resources around you while you're at school. And I'm happy to say that, I'm at a school that doesn't have an animation major, and I'm an animator, but I can confidently say that every class I'm taking right now is contributing to what I need to be a better animator. I'm taking an Intro to Creative Writing course because I want people to critique my writing and to make me a tighter storyteller. And I'm taking film courses. And I don't really care about the essays I write in those classes. I care about the thumbnails I do of the cinematography and the layouts that I see in the films that we're watching. I take out of every experience only what is useful for me, like a leech. Okay? It's like you grab on and you only suck blood out. You don't care about the rest of the flesh. Yeah. All right. Next slide. Internships. I guess this is theoretically what I'm qualified to talk about. This is another relatable meme. Me sliding into any studio internship application portal. So if you are enrolled in school, this is a big deal because you have unique access to applying to summer internships at all of your favorite companies, probably. Next slide. Oh, okay, sorry. Can we go to the next slide after this? No, okay, yes, okay, this is it. So, this is just pulled off of the Disney feature internship application, but as you can see, first requirement, students who will be returning to school in the fall. Okay, I'm really sorry, seniors. You're out of luck. But even, if you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, you should be applying. And I know you might be like, Natalia, I'm not good enough for that. But again, the moral of my story is these things that seem distant and too far above your pay grade are really not that distant, especially if you start trying to reach them now, because you're gonna keep trying and eventually you might get there. So I applied this year. They didn't take me. They sent a very nice rejection letter, and I'm gonna apply again. And I learned a lot from doing it this first time. And it got me a storyboard portfolio now, which means that whenever a new internship opportunity pops up, I can immediately send that portfolio instead of being like, oh, wait, I don't have any work to show them and letting that opportunity pass you by. A lot of companies just post internships on their websites. Next slide. There's Disney TV, Disney Feature, Pixar, Cartoon Network, Warner Brothers. All of these places offer summer internships that you 100% could be applying to. Not all internships are created equal, and they have different focuses. So, as I talked about, my personal interest is storyboarding. So Disney and Pixar are very appealing to me because they have a story-specific internship. So that's what I would be aiming for. But if you're into design, they will have design-specific internships. If you're into 3D modeling, they're gonna have 3D-specific internships. Cartoon Network and Warner Brothers, they're owned by the same company, by the way. And the top three are also owned by the same company. We love monopolies! As an FYI, when I was interning at Warner Brothers, my primary role was not artistic. And for a long time, interns across the board were not allowed to touch company property, and this is because of the union. So in LA, there is a union that protects animators. It's very awesome, very cool. The only thing is that if you're an intern, it sucks because they want to protect the fact that art is made by unionized employees, and since interns are not union, they don't want them to make art. Disney and Pixar solves this problem by making up assignments for you. So that's kind of like the sweetest deal. You get paid to learn things and complete fake homework assignments. That sounds really cool. Warner Brothers and Cartoon Network solves this problem by essentially turning you into a production assistant. So that's what I've been doing. However, I don't want to knock it because I have learned so much by running around and pushing papers. And it sounds like so boring, because it is, but first off, I learned how to handle adult stress when you're working 40 hours a week. And that's when you understand that college students really have a lot of time. And I learned every part of the pipeline because I actually want to work in Minnesota, not in LA. And that means we have to handle a lot more parts of the pipeline here because we're smaller studios. We don't have as much delegation of tasks to very specialized experts. So you need to know how to handle a lot of parts of the production. And there is one story that I think is like representative of what I would advise about being an intern as a whole. So my first year of interning at Warner Brothers, I was 18, I had just graduated high school, I was extremely nervous, and I showed up on this show, and I worked there for a month, and I was like very diligent, and I did my best, but the head showrunner, who was this guy who had like trained under Steven Spielberg and was an old school Disney animator and basically, amazing. He never spoke to me because he was constantly running around doing all of his showrunner duties. And one day I was assigned to help put together a clip show, which is going through old episodes of the show and pulling interesting tidbits to cut together into a reel that they would be showing internally. And I started doing this process. The production manager above me gave me specific instructions on how to name every file and how to organize it on the server, and that's like integral to every part of animation production. If you know how to name files properly, you will be hired more. This is a fact. This is a side note, but that same showrunner later told me, one of the storyboard artists I became close to on the show, Brandon, he was like, when I need a last minute like animatic story fix, like I'm gonna give it to Brandon always. And you know why? Because Brandon never messes up the file system. And that means it will be delivered to the editors on time and it will be shipped overseas correctly, which saves money because you don't need retakes and you don't need to communicate overseas to the Korean studio or the Philippine studio or whatever. And like there's this whole domino effect that you're not aware of until you're in the nitty gritty. So basically name files properly. Back to the story though. I'm working, and then the showrunner, he storms into my office and he's yelling and he's very upset. And I was immediately scared because obviously I didn't want my only interaction with this man to be disappointing him because I wanted to be doing a good job as an intern and I wanted him to think of me as a valuable person to have around. And I started to figure out what he was trying to get at, which was that he seemed to be confused about the way we were naming the files for the clip show, and he was someone who expressed that confusion as anger. And that's not to say that that was okay. And later, my boss, who I really appreciate and she really vouched for me, talked to him that was not good to essentially like take out anger on someone who didn't have control over the process. I was not the one who decided the naming system for the clips. But I was like, okay, he's expressing his confusion, his anger. He got it out, and I started, walking him through the way we were naming the files. And it took about an hour for him to like kind of get his footing around the system and to go to the correct person that I directed him to change the system. And then 2 hours later, I was like pretty worried and upset that I had kind of ruined my chances of ever talking to him again. But he called me into his office, and he was like, "What do you want to do?" And I was like, "I want to be a storyboard artist." And he was like, "What kinds of storyboards?" And I was like, "I want to do emotional stuff, maybe feature." And he was like, "I can teach you that." And he started walking me through how to use Storyboard Pro, and he took an hour to just talk to me about resources. And after that, I started working on a little story test to show to him for critique, and he consistently gave me notes, and I worked on that like for the rest of my internship outside of my regular duties. So basically, it's okay if you're just a production assistant, because if you are making an impact on how people feel in their workflow, they will also try to help you. So that's my story. Yeah. Wait, can we go back like 2 slides? Okay, so to explain this slide, pick up your phone. I forgot to tell the actual story of how I first got the Warner Brothers internship, but I just sent an online application when I was in my senior year of high school. They had this special program that was like a 4-year reach internship. Like you could go into it straight after high school, and you would intern there every summer for 4 years, plus a scholarship. It was a sweet deal, but they only give it to one person. So I was like, it's never gonna happen. I'm just gonna send them my portfolio since I have one. And then 3 months later, I keep getting repeated phone calls from Burbank, California. And it was an unknown number, and I was a high school senior, and I didn't pick up my phone. I didn't pick up my phone until they left a voicemail on the 3rd call. And that's when I was like, oh my God, that's Warner Brothers. And so the moral of the story, because I didn't pick up my phone till the 3rd call, I was the last person to interview. And it was a phone interview. It was a panel of six folks, and they grilled me on like, what do you think is the most important fact about your generation for the president of Warner Brothers to know? And what's your worst quality? And that sort of stuff. But I kind of nailed it, guys. Not gonna lie. That's a general piece of advice of, if you know how to talk about yourself, it is going to make your life so much easier as an artist. And it sucks because we're visual artists. Like, why do we have to worry about words? But if you can talk about your work, it's gonna help people be on the same page with you and know how to advocate for you, rather than them just looking at your work and having to trust that you're a decent person, which is sometimes a risk. So I really recommend it. Anyways, but because I was the last person to interview, 30 minutes after I hung up, they called me back, and the head of HR was like distraught because they really loved me, but they had already selected somebody else. And what happened after that was 2 hours later, they called me back. Okay, wait, a little bit of context. They were like, okay, sorry, this is the only internship available to high school students. You have to wait a year so that you can be enrolled in school, and then we can offer you an internship next summer. I was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. I was like crying. I was like, they're considering me. Oh my God, thank God. And like, that was that. And then 2 hours later, I got a call back, and they said, hey, head of HR showed your film to one of our top producers, and she was like, yeah, we'll give her an assistant production manager position for the summer. That'll do it. And basically I said yes. Anyways, so that's the story of how I got into Warner Brothers, and I've been there ever since. Pick up your phone. Okay, I already covered this point, but learn to write so that you can talk about yourself. As a general rule of thumb, before you send an email or a cover letter or an artist bio to anyone, read it out loud. Okay, thank you. Enough of the nitty-gritty. Why bother with all of this? Animation is hard. Yeah, it is. But next slide. Internal validation. Okay, I'm gonna pick up my pieces of paper again because I want to make sure I get this right. Oh man, I got lost in my papers. So basically, you have to abandon your desire for institutional validation. Next slide. And you might be like, of course this is really easy for you to say, Natalia. You're the one that's like, I have 2 internships at name brand studio and But the truth is that if you rely only on institutional validation, they rarely reward what you should be doing, which is living your life and enjoying it and being happy. Because if they have their way, they will just try to turn you into an art-making machine, which will ironically suck you dry of everything that nourishes your art-making practice. Have you guys noticed that there's a lot of artists that only post autobiographical comics about making art? And I don't want to knock that because obviously I relate to those very strongly, but I worry about if those artists can speak to a greater audience. So you never want your life to be just art, even though I gave this whole talk about how you should get better at art and like really commit to it, because your work has to speak to a greater human experience, and if you're not living it, it can't do that. Also, relying on institutional validation gives you a lot of convenient excuses, because you're always going to be like, okay, when I get hired by the right company, then I will make the work I want to make. And the problem is that we don't know if that's ever going to happen for you or for me. There's an element of luck involved to life, and then you'll die without having made anything you care about. So you should just make it now. Another example is, waiting till your senior year thesis to make the film you want to make. You should just make it now. Just make it now. That's kind of what I have to reiterate. So maybe this talk is a scam because I had some tips to get you gigs at cool places with cool people, but the secret is that you should be your own sweet gig. Thank you. Okay, next slide. What am I up to now? This is just kind of like, what am I up to? Next slide. I'm at the University of Minnesota. There's this place called the E-Studio where we get a bunch of cool digital equipment. Because did you know that going to a public university means they give you money to do cool things instead of you giving them money to do cool things? Crazy thought. We should finance more public education. Anyways, so I get to be a research assistant in the art department. Who knew that was possible? You don't have to just research brain cancer. This is me. This is my really janky rig. That's like an iron with like a tripod in my phone hanging over a digital embroidery machine. Next slide. Where I ended up stitching animations, and that was my research project. And I'm excited to keep experimenting with this and see how the textures come out. Next slide. Yeah, as I've mentioned, I've been interning at Warner Brothers. I don't know if I'll come back next year, but they seem to be pretty pleased with my work. I hope nothing I said in this talk off-puts them in some way. Next slide. And I'm about to start a short film project with the same mentors that supported me when I was in high school. After Mike Owens, since Puny Entertainment ended its production of Danger and Eggs, he helped me transition to be with Alicia and Emery, and now I'm starting a new film fellowship with them to create this short film. it primarily features this little goddess, and this is her creating man. And initially she creates the universe because she loves creating, but when she creates man, she becomes too obsessed with how he sees her world, and she overindulges them until they overrun and destroy the creation she once loved. So there's that. Next slide. Yeah, so I guess my final point, my not so hidden agenda, is for us to make cool stuff in Minnesota with cool young folk. Thank you. That is all. This is where to find me. All right, so here's the part. Yeah, I guess, I feel like I should sit at this point for some reason. Okay.
Okay, so just try to ask it really loud.
Okay. Yeah. I grew up with like a passion for writing and art, and I think storyboarding lets me combine the two. I think also I really like that it lets me call the shots. I don't know if I'm a control freak, but storyboarding is the first step in the pipeline, and it determines what the movie is going to be. Also, to be honest, there's a bit of like, there's some feminism in there of, I don't know if you've seen the stats, but like 3% of feature animated film directors are women of color, I believe. Like, I think it might be slightly higher for women in general. Like 13% of TV directors are women. It's like basically story has been a boys' club for a very long time, and that's because of an unfortunate stereotype that women like to draw pretty things and men like to tell the story. But I think anyone can tell the story, and I would like to. Thank you. Yeah. You should watch films and reverse transcribe them. So like I like watch Jaws and I like storyboard it out, and like I watch Psycho. Like a lot of these classic films. Yeah, that'll teach you kind of to think about how it was put together initially, so that you can put it together the same way. Oh. Aw, thank you. That means a lot. Okay. I don't know how to answer that, Alicia, but I'm trying my best, you know? And there's a lot of things I don't know. I feel like this is the point where I can give a lot of disclaimers, like this talk isn't really adapted for like anybody who's into 3D animation, since I'm primarily 2D focused. And also, just in general, like we really don't know what's happening with animation right now. We're kind of entering this golden age where there's like more money in it than ever before, but also more paths to access that money, while simultaneously like you have no idea where the paths are coming from. So we're all stumbling around in the dark a little. So I don't really know anything. Oh wow, what timing. It was like, this is now when I will ask a question. I set a reminder. I mean, I made my intent clear, like I'm trying, you know, Disney, if you're listening. But again, at the same time, I feel like I should reiterate, while I'm talking about aiming for these internships out in LA, in the end, my goal is I'm only hoping to complete those because they offer a form of education that would be paid, and I want to take that education back here and apply it to the projects I want to do here. It's not actually about the name brand quality of the company. I mean, guys, if you don't stop me, I'm going to like ramble about a lot of things. But this is actually an important point that I forgot. Something I learned from this summer that was crucial for me was, okay, the first summer I was at Warner Brothers, I was on a show that no one really knew about, and I really had a good time, and I developed a lot. But this summer, when I was offered the position on Animaniacs, I was like, oh wait, like people know this, like Steven Spielberg is like producing this, like this is something people have their eyes on, and it doesn't make a difference in your day-to-day life at all. In the end, it's just the people you're working with and your quality of life. And that was a big turning point for me in realizing that I don't care where I am, I care about what I'm doing. So, yeah. Over here. What's your, it's okay if you don't have a focus, but are you interested in like animation as a craft or storyboarding or? Oh, okay. You said you want to be a character designer? Okay. Well, in that case, I mean, it's still good to read the animation books. Like the classic one is Richard Williams. I don't remember the title, but if you Google Richard Williams and then like book, it will show up. It's the Animator's Survival Kit, something like that. Anyways, yeah, that's really the book. But Maurice Noble wrote a book on design. He's the guy who did the backgrounds. You lent it to me. Anyways. And every designer on the Animaniacs production, I swear, had it on their bookshelf. Like, it just teaches you to think about design in the best way possible. And he's the guy who did all the backgrounds on like Looney Tunes cartoons, like Roadrunner and like Daffy Duck stuff. And it's like all about how to complement the animation without overtaking it. It's very good. Yeah. All right, Mike, it's your turn. Well, you would know about that, Mike, because he saw me fail. He saw me fail a lot. My first film, I feel like now that I'm here, I'm like, okay, my first film, it won Best of Festival at Teen Animation Festival International, and it's very good. But when I was making it, it took me a year because I was bad. I only really animated the thing in the last 2 months because the first 10 were just learning how to animate. So it took me a month to animate the first shot, and then I ended up scrapping it entirely 3 months later because by that point I had gotten better and it was bad and I didn't want it to be in the film. So I guess my only answer to that is you have to be comfortable with iteration. The first thing you make is not the thing. It is just your first stab at it. So it's not really a failure. It's just you're creating the clay that you're molding the project out of. I guess there's more direct failure of if somebody rejects you, or if you don't get into the school you want, you don't get the job you want. And in that case, it's just the fact that we don't have any control over what happens to us really in our lives. So you just have to accept that. Yeah, sorry, maybe that's grim. Yes, my film, my second film, it will be in Photoshop because I like having access to all the textures. I think it lets you experiment more with creating a unique style and look for each project, so I like that. Also, hot tip, so Adobe's expensive, especially the full Creative Cloud package, but since you can get the Lightroom package for just $10 a month, I think, as a student, since you can use Photoshop to animate, what I'm going to do is what I've been doing is I'll pay for the cheaper Lightroom package for most of what I'm working on, and then I'll pay for just 1 month to get access to After Effects and Premiere to finish up the compositing. So it helps save some money. No, it depends on your personal goals. I think because I'm like interested in creating my own projects and like being kind of like hopefully eventually a sort of director role, I care about developing personal like unique take on things. But if you're interested in being a full-time character designer where you're just that position, your job will be always to design on other people's work and other people's stories. So the fact that you're looking at other shows and essentially copying them is a good way to go about it, because you need to be able to work in many different styles. You can become known for a certain, like a single style of work, and then people will only hire you for that. But I think in my experience, it's better to be flexible and prove you can do many styles. So yeah, it's really just about your goals. You don't necessarily have to develop your own personal style of character unless that's a long-term goal for you. Yeah.
Thank you, Natalia. That was amazing. I hope all you students out there have a lot more confidence now, even if it's 1/10 of the confidence Natalia has.